Man. Follow me around, that's it.
Hello, welcome to your Daily Strength Coach Podcast, Episode 8, Up in the Deadlift. Hello, and welcome back to Episode 8. Today is the 2nd of July, 2015. Today's question or topic comes from Michael Cowan, from a comment under Episode 7. Question reads, if your deadlift is not going up like mine, I have not hit a 1RM PR for 6 months, going for a double PR today. How do you increase when your volume is already pretty high? Because they say you can't do really high volume or frequency on deadlift cheers. He followed this up with, to help, the example, I deadlift 1 time a week. Week 1, 6 sets of 5. Week 2, 5 sets of 5. Week 3, 4 sets of 4. Week 4, 4 sets of 3. Week 5, 3 sets of 3. Week 6, 2 sets of 2. And then max cheers. Okay, first and foremost, we need to understand that there's not really anything special about the deadlift. The reason why it gets banded about like it does with things like Michael saying you can't train it with higher frequency or larger volumes is because people tend to let themselves slip with their form more on deadlift than in any other lift. And as such, they suffer a lot more back spasm and blockages of movement. Like when I say blockage of movement, I mean lower back goes into spasm, becomes stiff, tight hamstrings, sore glutes, sore upper back. It's kind of a feeling that you don't really get with squats unless you train them with fairly loose form or you train them with very high intensity, going to failure on all sets for a few sets. You might feel something fairly similar with squat. Deadlift does put the back in a bit more of an exposed position and a longer exposed position, and as thus the lever arms acting on it are much greater, which means the temptation is to shorten that lever arm. And to do that, you round your back, you shorten the vertical footprint of the horizontal footprint of your back, which reduces the amount of force needed to move that weight. However, the outcome of rounding your back is you end up using the muscles of your spine in a concentric, eccentric manner, mainly. Well, they move in the eccentric, then they move in the concentric. The muscles are designed to do that, of course. They're designed to manipulate your spine. However, they're not really. The architecture is not the same as like a chest, a quadricep, or a glute. They're not designed for movement. They're not forceful movement anyway. The muscles of the the muscles of the hip joint and the knee joint are designed for locomotion. They're designed to accept force. They're designed to exert force. The muscles of the spine are only meant to do that on a lesser level. If you look at the spine of a animal who's maybe designed for four-legged locomotion, you might see a lot more kind of musculature around that spine. If it's like a quadruped, probably has a lot more thicker musculature up and down the spine, probably a lot more fast twitch fiber in that area because it's designed for that. Obviously, we still have remnants of that in our own spines, but our back is more designed for postural demands, holding position, moving around, and it can exert force, but it's not as designed, and thus it struggles with exerting force in a concentric, eccentric manner. So that's kind of the reason why people kind of egg away from doing deadlift for multiple frequency or higher volumes, is because they let their technique slip, and as thus they suffer for it. So if you look at this in the context of a bench press, this program in the context of a bench press, or this program in the context of a squat, you're doing 30 reps on week 1, 25 reps on week 2, 16 reps on week 3, 12 reps week 4, 9 reps week 5, and 4 reps on week 6. That's not high volume, not even close to high volume. 30 reps is fairly low volume for a week entire. It does depend on the program you follow, of course, and it does depend on the intensity that you're doing. If you're doing 6 sets of 5, where the 5 represents a fairly near maximal load, and that's certainly going to put a stress on, and you're certainly going to get some kind of adaptation from that. But that is the sort of program that will last for maybe one cycle or two. It is not the sort of program where you're going to get a lot of progress on, especially if you've been lifting for a time. So what we can do here, Michael, quite easily, is we introduce a second deadlift day. I know Ian's already suggested something like this. And now if you find that you struggle with back pain in the deadlift, the easy solution is to do deadlift off a block on the first day of the week. So I know if you've listened to this podcast, you've heard me mentioning a program where you squat, bench, and deadlift on day 1 and the same on day 5 in the week. So it's easily to do it from block. It encourages much better postures. It's easier on the hips, it's easier on the back. And you don't need to handle a heavier load. Handle the same load you're going to take from the floor, but just do it off a block. Therefore, you're going to get more frequency through the week. Your volume will be higher, and keep your form a bit stricter. If you do pull with a little bit of a rounded back, or a lot of a rounded back, try work on your technique so you don't round your lumbar spine. You should really save that for personal best attempts or the platform. It's going to happen. When you go for a max, you're going to round the upper back. You might round the lower back a little bit. Most good deadlifters won't, but you definitely will round the upper back. But in training, try to avoid that because it places stressors on the spine and increases recovery time. Another option would be if you don't suffer from deadlift, as you find you recover from it quite well, then something, a 3-day-a-week program is probably quite a good idea. A reasonably high block on Monday, say just below the knee, mid shin, mid shank, on day 2, and from the floor on day 3, and just start obscenely light and wave up for 5-6 weeks to the point where you're hitting PBs, rep PBs. I wouldn't probably aim for single PBs, but aim for like 3 to 5 rep Ps on week 6. So like a fairly easy example of a sort of program like that would be, right, my max deadlift at the minute is 200 for 1. So for me to be able to do 210 for 1, then my 5RM needs to be 185. I'm just pulling that out of my arse. I don't know if that's correct or not, but let's say your 5RM needs to be 185. Okay, so that means I need to pull 185 from the floor for 5. Okay, so if I go to mid-shin, I reckon I could probably go 195 for 5. And if I go from a high block, I reckon I could go 205 for 5. Okay, work backwards from that. So week 5 or 6, so let's call week 5 of the program is going to be from below the knee, 205 for 5, from mid-shin, or 14 inches, something like that, 13, 14 inches. I'm going to do 195 for 5, and then on the Friday, on day 3 of week 5, I'm going to do my PB, I'm going to do 185 for 5. Minus 10 kilos from that every week, so week 4 then becomes 195 for 5 from below the knee, 185 from mid-shin, and 175 from the floor. So on the first week, you'd be looking at a fairly easy workout. You'd be looking at 135, 145, 155, and that would just wave up over a 5-week period. Something like that is going to introduce a lot more frequency. You're only working up to the top set, so you're not doing like 5-6-5, 6-6. You're just you're working up the top set, and you're kind of waving up to what will be a PB, but you're preparing yourself for that, and the frequency will act as the kind of stimulus there for a bigger deadlift. Or again, you can look at something like an Ed Cohen Philippi deadlift cycle. I know it's a very popular cycle. It's a 10-week cycle. Not probably one of the better cycles in my opinion. I have used it. It didn't result in a PB, but it did get my deadlift higher than it was. Or you can look at an Ed Cohen approach where you would just look at the weight you want to lift in 10 weeks and then work backwards from there. Go 3s to 5s to 6s to 8s to 10s, 2 weeks of each of those reps. There are an infinite number of ways you can do this. Or you can look at variations. You can look at work from deficit on your deadlift day and work from blocks on the first day. And then do that for 5 weeks. Use a progressive program. Kind of if you were doing 6 sets, say, in that week, maybe you'd be looking at 4 sets in each workout. Start easy and work up over time. There's nothing special about deadlift really. It is a concentric only lift. So another way you could maybe look at it is if you did a program like that, but you try to control eccentric motion. And there you find a larger stimulus for your glutes, your hamstrings, and your lower back for strength. That could be another way of approaching it. There are umpteen ways of getting over your hump. I think a good place to start would be use a program reasonably similar to that. Maybe take 1 or 2 sets off that. Maybe use the same percentages, and then just go off the block on day 1, and then from the floor on day 5. I think you'll probably find you'll get some traction with that. But yeah, hope that helps, Michael. That concludes today's episode. I will see you tomorrow for more of the same. This is Mark of your Daily Strength Coach podcast, signing out.